Welcome back, everyone, to the Beyond the Playbook podcast. And as you can see here, we have a friend of the podcast back with us, Philippe O'Connor. He was so kind to give us his time to give us a little bit of a temperature check on the ground from Canada, and he's right now speaking out of Vancouver right now as we speak. It's right now 10:16 over there at 10:16 a.m. in the morning, and yeah, he's had a very packed week, I would say. And first of all, Philip, thanks for coming on to our podcast. And how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Like I say, actually, it's very, very busy when you get here. This is the biggest World Cup there's ever been. There's 48 teams, so it's spread out around I don't know how many cities. So I'm here in Vancouver, but we're not just doing the games that are in Vancouver and all the World Cup news that's around Vancouver, but you're covering other teams as well. I live in Stockholm, Sweden, so obviously I'm going to have an awful lot of input into the Swedish team coverage and the Norwegian team coverage because I've been covering them for maybe 20 years as well. So it's been very busy, but I always say about this job, it beats working for a living. It's just so much fun to be around the World Cup, to be around soccer and soccer people, and to talk about the games.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Firstly, I wanted to say commiserations. Ireland were very close to qualifying through the playoffs. That is one thing which I wanted to say. I was really hoping to see them because they would have added a little bit of their own color as well. Especially like how the Scottish fans have taken to the World Cup, especially in the US. So that's
Yeah,
one thing which I wanted to
I
say.
turned on the TV the other day here, and there was baseball on from Fenway Park in Boston,
Yes.
and there was like 5,000 Scottish people there in kilts, and they're just they're soccer fans, so they go in there and they
Yeah.
sing and they drink beer and they don't even know what's happening on the field,
Yeah.
And I think
Awesome. Yeah.
the Irish would have contributed something similar. And of course, if you go back to 1994, the World Cup then, the Ireland played there. We beat Italy 1-0 in the first game, and then lost to Mexico, played against Norway in one of the worst games of soccer I've ever seen. And it was a tremendous experience for Irish people and for Irish fans. And it's always when it's a World Cup, and even though there's 48 teams, that's nearly a quarter or 20% of the world's teams that are eligible to play. And when you don't make it, it's kind of like not being invited to the party. But hey, I still get to come anyway, so that's good.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So, first of all, I think I want to ask you about what is the temperature like on the ground in Canada, especially because I think out of all the three host nations, they tend to be the least spoken about because I think the US, of course, because by dint of them hosting the majority of the games, they will have a lot of the headlines and due to other reasons as well, off the pitch as well. Whereas Mexico has that legacy of hosting two prior World Cups as well, especially with the cathedral that they have at the Azteca. I just wanted to get to know how has it been in Vancouver, and of course, they do have games in Toronto as well. But how has Canada taken to the World Cup, and what's been the feeling like towards the national team over there?
Yeah, it's fascinating, Ashish, because this is a weird country when it comes to sport. Ice hockey is very much the dominant sport here. Canada is quite like America in some ways, and it's completely different in others. So
Mhm.
it's been fascinating to talk to people. We were in the North America sports store yesterday, here in Vancouver. And there's a man there who's an Italian immigrant. He came here when he was 10 years old and he brought his football with him. He grew up playing soccer in immigrant communities against German teams and Polish teams and Irish teams. And, this was their life, this was their culture when they brought it here to Vancouver. And these are the people who are really relishing the World Cup coming here. There's the newer generation of, there's an awful lot of kids here who can't afford to play ice hockey because you need all the equipment and you have to play indoors and there's ice time. And all of these things cost money in countries like this. So soccer is such a simple game. This is why it is the world's game. All you need is a ball and
Correct.
a bit of space to play. And you don't even necessarily need people to play against. You can just have
Yeah.
some fun playing by yourself. So the city, to me, and Canada in general, is really embracing it. It's been, an interesting thing because it's almost like a subculture. Soccer has been a subculture. There are other sports here like rugby too, because Canada has a strong sort of, you have, of course, the French heritage and the French speaking people, but there's also a strong sort of links to Scotland and to Britain. There's
Mhm.
many Macs, here from Scotland and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And they brought these games with them as well as the other European immigrants that I mentioned there. So,
Yeah.
and then, of course, there's people from South America, there's people from the subcontinent where you're talking to me from and that kind of thing as well. So it's very interesting to see that melting pot. But this is their moment. This is when their sport gets on the map and they're getting behind the team. So I was out there yesterday at the Canada training ground, and a
Yeah.
friend of mine, Margie Johal, who's a journalist here, she was saying that normally there's like five people when the Vancouver Whitecaps have a press conference or when they have an open training session there. And yesterday there was probably 50. There's lots of journalists, lots of interest. Big talking point, of course, is the fitness of Alphonso Davies, who is their sort of talismanic player. And again, to me, he's indicative of this entire World Cup. I was thinking of this as the World Cup of immigrants. A
Yeah,
young man who was born.
the diasporic World Cup, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is which is interesting as well geopolitically when you think about the state of America now and everything that's been said about immigration, emigration in these places, and yet we have people coming in and scoring goals and performing. Yassine Ayadi for Sweden, whose father's from Tunisia, his mother's from Morocco, could have played
Yeah,
for either nation, is here playing for Sweden.
yeah,
So, but Canada is definitely embracing it now, and there's always people who aren't interested in soccer. I don't understand those people, but they exist. And you'll bump into them and they say, "Oh yeah, no, I know the thing is going on," but they're happy it's going on. It's not like they see this, for the most part. I know there's businesses affected and people experiencing homelessness are being affected as well, but for the most part, people are very much enjoying the World Cup here so far.
yeah. That's awesome to know. And I think the Canadian team is based out of Vancouver, right? If I'm not wrong, they are
Yeah,
training
so
on.
they were in Montreal to start with, and they played their first game in Toronto, and now they're going to be based in Vancouver because they have the
Yeah.
National Soccer Development Center here at the
Hmm.
University of British Columbia, and that's their
That's
training base now
yeah.
for the rest of the World Cup.
And if I'm not wrong, they have added incentive to finish top of their group, right? Because the first round of the round of 32 game will also be in Vancouver, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yes, yeah. So their round of 32 games should be here if they top the group, So that's a big thing. And again, this is one of those places. Vancouver is a soccer city. So you go back to
Mm.
1974 when the Vancouver Whitecaps were founded.
Yeah.
Professional soccer has always struggled in North America because you have
Mm.
the NBA, you have the NFL,
Yeah.
you have and people here they watch
NHL.
sports south of the border as well. You have the NHL is absolutely huge in this city in particular. So it's a lot of competition. Baseball is big here as well. There's a lot of baseball diamonds as you drive past
Yeah.
down the main streets here. So, but it's sort of captivating people now because right now the only thing really that's going on is baseball. There's no American football or that kind of thing going on at the moment.
Mm.
So soccer has its opportunity now, and it would be absolutely brilliant for the Canadian people and for Canadian soccer if they could stay in this city for the entirety of their World Cup run almost.
Yeah. I think that particular group is also a little bit on a knife's edge, right? Because all of them have scored 1-1 goal each and they're all on 1-1 point. I just want to get your take. Like, who do you think is qualifying from that group? Like, from just on your gut.
Do you know what? It's very hard to see past. Who have they got now? You have Canada.
And
We
Switzerland, Qatar.
Switzerland as well, Bosnia as well. Yeah, yeah. Is it like Australia the other night? No, Australia was a different group altogether. You see, this is the problem with the World Cup, actually. Right?
Yeah,
When you're coming in, my head is exploding with the amount of
I
possibilities there.
swear, like,
You would have picked Switzerland to top the group. And now
yeah,
that may be European bias or that kind of thing, right? But you probably would have picked them to begin with, and maybe Canada second. But like, it's so hard to tell. Like you say, each country has 1 point, 1 goal scored, 1 conceded. Canada, I think if they can get Alphonso Davies back, right?
mm,
And this is the amazing thing. Like yesterday, the amount of cloak and dagger stuff that's going on around him. And he came to training. They said he was in some return to play protocol. We went, okay, we don't know what that means, but presumably he's still recovering. And then yesterday we asked for a status update, and they said, no, we're not giving you a status update. We're going,
yeah,
okay, why? And what they're trying to do is like, to me, it's almost childish. They're playing their
yeah,
cards close to their chest and this kind of thing. But just say if the guy's fit or not. Like Qatar and
mm,
sitting there going, okay, we're going to have a completely different game plan for
yeah,
if he plays or not. That's not
mm,
how they're going to look at this thing. But they're doing what they're doing. But I do think that if they can get him back, they have a much better chance of getting out of the group. And at the moment, it's all open. Like the first
yeah,
round of group games, we may as well not have played them because they all turned out exactly the same, right?
yeah.
But if they can get in there, they can steal that top spot in the group, definitely. But Switzerland again, I would, that Swiss team, I've watched them for a long time, and they're pretty good. They're pretty solid, and they tend to play well in the group stage. Maybe not so much in the knockout stages later on, but
Yeah.
they tend to be pretty solid.
Yeah, they're a really solid professional team. And I was actually surprised that they conceded the last minute equalizer to Qatar, actually. Like they were playing with their food a lot, I felt, with that game.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And
very
that's the
interesting.
interesting thing as well, though, Aziz, because if we look back to the World Cup that was in Qatar, and they were very much overmatched there. And then, of course,
Yeah,
there's this thing of, okay, 48 teams in the World Cup. I don't like the idea of 48 teams in the World Cup. I think this should be an exclusive club. And I accept the argument that, iron sharpens iron and that it's good for smaller nations to play at the World Cup. Yeah, but you have to earn that right in your continental championships, in your continental qualifying. This is not, so here's your participation trophy, walk away.
yeah,
I want to see the best teams and the best players in the world at this competition. But Qatar undeniably, and somebody made the point to me, before the World Cup that there's never really a legacy from the World Cup. You don't look back on the USA 1994 and think, wow, in the 5 years after that they made huge steps forward in the game.
Correct.
They
Yeah.
haven't. It's taken 20 years. But Qatar coming here and getting that equaliser in the way they did is a
Yeah.
very interesting development for Qatari football and for Middle Eastern football, where they've discovered that you can't translate money into success directly. You have to build a culture, you have to build a
Correct.
history, you have to build an identity and a way of playing. So from that perspective, it's definitely interesting. And it's not over yet, because they're going to arrive now in Vancouver. The game, as we're speaking, the game is tomorrow between Canada and Qatar. And they have no pressure. Nobody's expecting them
Yeah.
to do anything. All the pressure is on the Canadians to
They're
deliver.
playing with house money at this moment.
Very much so. And that, I think, is like, if you have that opportunity to go out there. Now, it's not everybody can look at those things that we just mentioned, those factors, and say, okay, I can go out there and I can play and I can relax and I can let my shoulders drop
Yeah.
and be myself. Not everybody can do that. But if they can do that, then there is a chance of an upset.
Yeah, especially with the third place teams also going through, right? With the potential for that as well. Like, there's a lot of incentive for them. Like, especially even their last games against Bosnia as well. I'm not saying that Bosnia is a weak team by any chance, but there is a opportunity for them to do something to set
Yeah,
the cat
and I
among
think
the pigeons.
Yeah, and I think Qatar, they didn't come here to make up the numbers, So
Yeah.
Qatar is a little bit special because if you look at the league in Qatar, as a friend of mine is a coach with one of the professional clubs there, and he was telling me that there's a meeting usually, once a week after a round of fixtures where all the clubs come together and talk about what went well, what didn't, because
Mm.
the whole thing is that the league is one thing, but what they want is success from the national team. So
Correct.
very
Yeah.
much before the World Cup 4 years ago, the clubs kind of worked together to make sure that the national team players were going to get to the highest level possible. Now,
Yeah.
that wasn't as high a level maybe as they would have wanted, arguably, fine. But these guys now, I don't know, there's a look about them now because so much of international football, and we're going to be seeing this in the World Cup from now until the final, right? It's to do with organization. It's to do with reading the information in front of you, reacting correctly, properly, swiftly to that information. And the Qataris, to me, they've come on an awful long way since since they hosted the World Cup 4 years ago. But it'd be interesting to see how far that takes them because what usually beats that then is the individual brilliance, which we've seen in the llast few days of an Ayadi, a Haaland, a Messi, of these guys. And one of the things that I'm not seeing at the moment is that, there's an awful lot of this. If you ever watch Olympic handball, where you're not allowed to go into the goal
Correct. Yeah.
area, you have to shoot from, I think it's 6 meters outside or something.
Correct.
And there's a lot of that kind of football going on. And the way to beat that kind of defensive block, you have to attack the middle of it. You're not necessarily going to break through the middle of it, but you have to attack that in order to get it to collapse on itself, And this is what the Qataris are doing, how far they can go if they have that individual talent. And it's talent over time as well. You need guys who can deliver for 5, 6, 7 matches, not just, one moment of brilliance and then, hey, I've done mine. You need these guys to deliver every game.
Yeah. Like, especially the keeper, Abu Nada, was on top form against the Swiss. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do against Canada. And I hope it's a good game. And I hope you are witness to a really good game as well, as seeing as you'll be watching it. Now, speaking of Vancouver, with regard to the first game which happened over there between Australia and Turkey, for example, I just wanted to get an understanding of how the experience was at the match. Was it like fully like Turkey fans and Australian fans, or was there a little bit of interspersing of like the local Canadian fans as well?
Yes, so there was a lot of Canadian fans. A lovely hotel that I'm staying here. The girl who's working at reception, herself and her husband and her 7-year-old daughter went to the game as well. Because
Wow.
this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for these cities for people to go. There was Turkish fans are everywhere. Like it doesn't matter. The sports store I was telling you about, the guy who owns that, the Italian guy, he was telling me that so many Turkey fans had turned up in the last couple of weeks to buy the national team shirt, and they were there. So FIFA, they give like, I think it's 6% or 8% of the tickets to each national federation. And they're usually behind one of the goals, just to the side behind one of the goals. So there was a lot of Australians bunched together on one side, a lot of Turkish people together on one side. And you could hear the Turkish fans, when they're starting to get frustrated and they were chanting for Arda. They were going, Guled, trying to get him going in the first and the second half. And then, of course, the Aussies went completely bonkers when they scored those 2 goals. But that was a fascinating game as well because it's interesting how you can come to a World Cup and you think that, okay, maybe like Australia against Turkey is not going to be the hottest game, or Canada against Qatar is not going to be the hottest game. For those people and for those countries, it is the most important game that day. It doesn't matter if Brazil are playing or Argentina are playing.
Yeah.
When your nation is playing, that's it. And in all of these things, there's a sort of a casual interest as well, because I want to see things I've never seen before. I want to see players I've never seen before. I want to see tactics, and I want to see effort, and I want to see, okay, how does this guy go against that guy? And to see how that works out. Australia's tactics were very, very clear. Sit back, soak it up, hit them on the break. They did it perfectly twice. It was just incredible how well they did that. They carried that out. And Turkey couldn't find that. Like Arda Güler was incredible how his shots were all pretty much from distance. They were all from the same little pocket with his left foot from the same place, and they all had the same result. They all went over the bar, you know. So it was fascinating to see that. So from that point of view, I really enjoyed that game. I don't know. I suppose we'd probably call it one for the purists. I don't think everybody would have enjoyed the game
Yeah.
as much as I did, but I found it fascinating tactically because there's so much at stake in World Cup games. When you mentioned that's our national pride and that, and people putting on the Turkish shirt and that, and the atmosphere around games like that is always special. When we go to that, it's like going to a big concert with somebody that you, a musician you really like. You know, when you go there and we're all part of this moment together, I don't know if there's 50, 60, 100,000 people out on the streets around the stadium. There's always a buzz. There's always something, you can almost feel it in the air. And it was just a fantastic atmosphere. And if it was like that for Australia against Turkey, I can only imagine what it's going to be like when the home team, the host nation, plays against Qatar tomorrow.
Yeah, I think like especially with regard to the Australia point, I think a lot of analysts, a lot of people outside of the Australian bubble, or like who know what the Australian team was about, they kind of underestimate them because they are a pretty solid team. Like in World Cups, like from what as far as I remember, also they're very solid. And I felt like even the manager Tony Popovich, he made a couple of big calls as well, right? With Matty Ryan getting dropped for Paddy Beach, and also I forgot what was the other major change as well. But with Jackson Irvine also not playing for Ocon Eckert, if I'm not wrong, the guy who gave the assist for Iran Kunda. So he made some big calls, like very courageous calls, I would say, to
I love it,
facilitate that.
particularly the goalkeeper one. Like everybody was looking at the goalkeeper call and seeing Beach starting there. They go, oh, okay, what's after happening here? You know, because
Yeah,
Matty Ryan has been sort of synonymous with that team for so long. But
correct.
what's interesting as well, as she says, is like coaches nowadays, they talk about not just the team that starts the game, but also the team that finishes the game. And Australia really did that very well because with the substitutions they had, they were able to keep up the pressure on Turkey. Whereas Turkey they're one of those squads where you probably have 14 or 15 guys who are really, really top level international footballers. Now, the
Yeah,
other guys are good, right? But they're not game changers. They're not guys. I think it was Yildiz came on.
yeah,
Kerem Yildiz came on and really made a difference down that left side
yeah.
and that kind of thing.
I was
But
shocked
they
he didn't
don't.
start, by the way. I was shocked he didn't start.
Yeah, and it was interesting to see, like, that he started. I mean, they try these things, and like, there's so many players now again, and this is worth watching out for, particularly with the European teams and players who play in Europe. These guys are so tired, it's off the charts, you know.
Hmm.
So they literally don't have 90 minutes. The intensity of the football here, the heat here, and that kind of thing, like. It's so difficult to be able to play, for 90 plus minutes, you know. So you're looking at players, especially in that Turkey team. There was a lot of guys with heavy legs who went, a good distance through even if it's the UEFA Conference League or whatever, they made their way all the way through this. That's like, these guys are playing 60 or 70 games,
Correct, yeah.
So using your bench correctly is a big thing as well. And I just don't think that Turkey had the energy. Once they went 2-0 down, it kind of
Yeah,
went flat and you thought, okay, they're just saving themselves for the next day because they know they're not getting this back.
yeah. I think yeah, like even that group is also interesting with especially they happen to be in the US group as well with Paraguay as well. And US did start on a good note especially like they did. I think that was one of the in my recent memory, like one of the best US American performances I've ever seen. I don't think
Okay.
like they were very good, I felt, and that's also a very interesting group. And yeah, I think I don't want to take too much more of your time as well. So I just want to end with this. Uh, yeah, I mean, speaking as you've lived a lot of your life in Sweden. We of course have to talk about the Swedish team, and
Sure.
especially their performance was so good that the Tunisian coach Sabri Lamouchi was sacked after literally one game of the World Cup, and it's bizarre. Like, I mean, I mean, I didn't expect it, but like seeing all the backstory, and I heard there was a lot of politics going on behind the scenes in the Tunisian FA, but it's still like. To be fair, I actually didn't have much of a good opinion about Sweden. To be fair, like I didn't think they would do all that well, but that game, like they did give a good account of themselves. I don't know. You could correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, they did. They did okay. The thing about Sweden is that it's a very sort of Jekyll and Hyde kind of a team,
Mm,
right? They can turn up and they can be absolutely tremendous, and and then they can also turn up. I said that they have the capability to embarrass themselves at this World Cup as well. That hasn't happened yet. But even in that game that we saw, which was a pretty comprehensive victory, you're looking out there and you're going, okay, this team is not like, and again, it's the same thing with Norway yesterday. They scored a lot of goals and they did well and that kind of thing, but there was also a lot that was going wrong there. There wasn't like, there was long spells where they couldn't string 3 or 4 passes together and that kind of thing. I do think that this team, the big thing for the Sweden team is Alexander Isak and Victor Gyökeres up front. They're still learning to play together. So many times, one would have the ball, the other would make a run, and the ball should be let go. But they don't have that innate sense of timing where you can just let the ball go and the other guy's going to run onto it. And it's kind of like, if you look at Martin Ødegaard playing for Norway with Erling Haaland, he knows when to time that pass the whole time. So those two guys are working on that. So at the moment, it's very much two individuals trying to work their way out together. Anthony Elanga starting on the bench for Sweden is an interesting one because, again, that's to do with the management of energy and fitness and that kind of thing. Benjamin Nygren, who's not the best known, he left footer, plays for Celtic, but a very good player, very good creative player, creates a lot of goals for Gyökeres in particular in the national team. So I do think that we'll see, like, the longer Graham Potter has, every session that Graham Potter has on the training ground with this team is making them better. Graham's an extremely intelligent man.
Yeah.
He has simplified an awful lot of what went wrong under John Dahl Tomasson, which is pretty much everything. He's simplified all those things, and he's given these guys back a sort of a confidence in themselves that they haven't had for a long time. That said, I don't know, some of the defenders that they have and some of the defending that they do is not great, So they do tend to play 5 at the back, which is great, and they don't care too much about the wings. They just go very compact in the middle, which they need to do. Because before, they used to concede so many goals from that sort of central position where people would just shoot from 20 meters and would fly into the net, So it's been a great start for them. As I say, a good start for Norway, but it's amazing how, Norway haven't been in a World Cup since 1998, right? And people are complaining because they won 4-1 yesterday. It's like, what's the matter with you people? No, it wasn't good in places. Like, again, they were a little bit dodgy. But to get to the Tunisian coach, that was just incredible that he was sacked because, like, the guy got the job 5 months ago. They didn't concede a single goal in qualifying. Comes in, ships 5 goals in a friendly to Belgium, and then comes in, ships another few to Sweden. Was it 4 goals the other day or whatever, And like what I hate to see is like this lack of long-term planning, the lack of an idea. I mentioned identity and culture to you earlier on there, right? If you're not putting people in, and the Swedes did the same thing. This is not an African thing, or it's not an outside Europe thing.
Yeah.
The Swedes did the same thing with John Dahl Tomasson. That man had nothing in common with Swedish football, Swedish soccer culture, and that kind of thing. They brought him in. He ruined everything, So now we have a situation where the Tunisian people have been looking forward to this tournament. It was a tournament that, on the back of not conceding a single goal in qualifying, they topped their group, 9 wins, 1 draw. And they should have been coming in here with their chest puffed up and ready to play, right? But now they've lost their first game in a pretty humiliating manner. They've sacked their manager. So, what are we going to do from here? And it's disappointing for a team because, people in Tunisia, they love their football. And for them to be sitting there now watching this, knowing that their World Cup is pretty much over and that there's all this dissent and disorganization back there. But you know what? If it means that Sweden go on and Norway go on, then that's going to make me extremely happy, I got to say.
Yeah. Okay, like just a small fact. What is the rivalry or the hatred between Sweden and Norway? I discovered it today, in fact. But what is it like? The regional thing, or is it more than that, more deeper than that?
It's quite complex actually, because this goes back to their languages are virtually the same, right? So I can understand when Norwegian people speak to me. There's 1 or 2, dialects or whatever I can do, but for the most part, I can speak Swedish to them. They can speak Norwegian to me. I change a few words, they change a few words, we chat away. It's fine, But the rivalry that they have, right? The top level of the rivalry is in cross-country skiing. And Norway are just so far ahead of them, it's absolutely unbelievable. So we're coming off a Winter Olympics back in February, where Norway were basically rubbing Sweden's nose in the dirt for weeks on end, and the Swedes just couldn't accept this. Now, the Norwegian men are very, very good, and the Swedish women are very, very good, but the Norwegian men are so good that you barely even see the Swedish women, and they don't get talked about as much in this rivalry. And then it comes to soccer. Now, Norway is like, cross-country skiing in Norway is not a sport, it's a religion. This is what people do every Sunday. They watch it on the TV. They really want to be good at soccer, but they've never had the same strong soccer tradition that Sweden has had. They've had a very traditional view of the game, that old sort of British English 4-4-2 thing. And that comes back from when they started showing English football on the TV in 1969 in Norway. It was just a way of shortening the dark winter evenings in that country. So there's a lot of Liverpool fans, Man United fans, but they haven't qualified for major tournaments. And when they've gotten there, they did okay. 1998 under Egil Olsen, they did very, very well. Or sorry, 94, 98. They did pretty well, but it was a very basic, rudimentary kind of football that everybody hated, including a lot of Norwegians, But that rivalry is incredible now. And when they thought that Sweden were going to miss out, because Sweden finished bottom of their qualifying group with 2 points, and they
By
were
the way,
like,
that is a real bizarre thing. How Sweden qualified that I couldn't get my head around it. Just because they won, they won the Nations League group, they got in.
yeah, exactly. And it's and you know what? They don't like when you bring it up, right? So I
Yeah,
sit there because the Swedish media is working from a Swedish perspective. They're speaking to a Swedish audience, and of course they're happy they're at the World Cup. I'm also happy that they're at the World Cup. But this is nonsense, right? When you beat Estonia and I don't know, I can't even remember who the other two teams
yeah,
are, and you got to the World Cup through that. Now, okay, they had to go and beat Ukraine, and they had to go and beat quite decent Polish side. Not the best
yeah,
Polish side I've ever seen, but quite decent. They had to go and beat them. Fine, okay, you got your spot. Is it really deserved? I don't know. I don't know if any of the places from 33 to 48 at this World Cup are really deserved anyway.
yeah,
But they're so sensitive about it. It's incredible. But that said, I think, and again, it goes back to that rivalry. Like, it's very hard to describe what this means to the Norwegian people. And the Swedes missed out. They made the quarterfinals, lost to England in 2018, missed out on Qatar. And what's really sort of interesting now is we were only talking about it here this morning is like Denmark missed out. Denmark are traditionally, the best footballing team. They may not have had the
correct,
success that Sweden had coming third in 1994, second in 1958, but Denmark have won the Euros in 1992, and they
correct.
play football along the ground. They don't like to knock this long ball the
Yeah,
way the
they're a
Swedes.
little bit of more of a cultured nation. Let's put it
Yeah,
that way.
exactly. More sort of a Dutch-leaning soccer culture
Yeah,
there, So that's it, and they're at home. So we're going to do a story for Reuters now about who the Danes are supporting because, like, it's kind of that thing. Like it's the devil of the deep
between
blue sea
Deep
in
Blue
one way.
Sea. Yeah,
But
yeah,
no matter what happens, man, it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see. Haaland in particular is an interesting one. He needed 43 minutes to score his first two World Cup goals. He's now joint top goal scorer at the World Cup with Shetty goal. Or just that record is going to go in the next game, I would say. But to see somebody like that come in and carry a team, and then to see Yasin Ayari come in, and you have Isak Gyökeres, there's more to come from all of these guys. So it's going to be a fascinating World Cup, both for the Scandinavians, but also for all the other 46 teams that are in it.
yeah. Like I think what I've loved is like I think all the teams have given a good measure of themselves up until today. We'll see another eight more teams. Like I think today, like we'll get more
Yeah.
data. But yeah, like it's been fascinating. Like there's been no like maybe the Curacao game was a little bit of a little bit it went a little out of hand, but other than that I think all the games have been very solid, and every team has been in the mix for the most part. Like, even Iraq yesterday for the most part they
Yeah,
did give a good account of themselves. Like they were a little unlucky that their keeper was not up to the mark, but yeah, I think yeah, it's been really awesome to see like the story of Iraq, like how they had like the most long winding series of like I think they played the most number of qualifiers to come to this World Cup.
21 games. Yeah, 21 games it took them to get here.
Insane.
And Sweden get here through the Nations League Group C. It's like, how is this even fair?
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I think we're done with our. I think I don't want to take much more of your time because you did say you have another commitment in some time.
Yep.
So yeah, like next week, hopefully, like if time permits, we will have more data also with us, and
Yep.
probably we'll be speaking after maybe a Canadian win, and you'll be able to speak about the emotions in the aftermath of that. And of course, we'll be, of course, speaking about Sweden and Norway's inter World Cup rivalry, even though they're in completely different groups, by the way. So yeah,
That's an entirely different tournament. Sweden and Norway have their own little mini
yeah,
tournament
yeah,
going
yeah.
on.
Like mini World Cup over there, the mini Scandi World Cup. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Philippe, and yeah, ciao.
Thank you very much indeed. Ciao. Got to run.